Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love, Shamika Michelle, and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-host Shamika Michelle. Will has the night off. And our guest this week is Christopher Harris. He is the executive director of Unhyphenated America. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Charles.
It's good to have you. You know, we're going to talk about a lot of things. I mean, we're all Black. It's Black History Month. Maybe we get into that a little bit. I've had the last couple of guests. I thought we were going to get there, but the conversation kind of veered off paths and we didn't get there. So we may talk about that and other things. But let's start off with, how is your Black Month going, Chris?
It's going very black. It's black outside. I'm black. We're all black. My phone's black. My laptop's black. It's all black.
Oh, so you keep everything black.
I keep it black, baby.
Okay, that's good. Well, I know that is one of the topics that we didn't, like I said, we didn't get to it before, but everybody else seems to be talking about it, about for the last, year and a half, about the importance of it, and then how it's taught, and then what it shouldn't be taught. We had our little CRT debate that went away, and now DeSantis has brought it back up again, talking about, with his forceful racist banning of African American history in the public schools in Florida. So we're going to start with that, I guess. What is your take on that, Chris, the banning of your history in Florida?
So I was actually down in Florida last week, and DeSantis spoke at a conference I was attending.
Whoa, stop. You took your you went to a conference where the anti-Black man was on stage speaking?
Yeah, he was like 20, 30 feet away from me, man, and he was just
spewing all kind of racist nonsense.
Spewing all kind of stuff that when I sat there and thought, I was like, but was he wrong? I mean, that's the question. It's like, man, it's interesting how we're expected to be triggered by everything, right? I mean, that we are, everybody views us as the most hyper emotional people on the planet. Like, it's like you say something and everybody turns and looks at the Black person, right? Like, are they going to be triggered by this? And as somebody who prefers to think rather than just live in my feelings, I just hear stuff and I say, well, even the whole idea of African American history. I mean, with my organization, with Unhyphenated America, we believe America is best when it's unhyphenated, that we fight against those hyphens that divide us. And so, you and I have had, gosh, God knows how many conversations about the fact that, I mean, I was almost grown before the term African American even was uttered, before it became in vogue. It's like I've been Black my whole life, but now all of a sudden when I reached adulthood, they wanted to say, no, you should call yourself an African American. I'm like, no, I'm grown. I can call myself whatever the hell I want to call myself. I like Black. Black is fine. I ain't never been to Africa, and I don't have anything against Africa. But and I'll tell you a real quick side note. I grew up in Germany. My father was in the military. And it's very interesting because when we would interact there were Africans there in Europe, and they made it clear that you were not African, right? So that was one of my first interactions. First time we started interacting with Africans, they're like, no, you're not African. And they see you, and it's like, when you have an American passport, there's the power with that blue passport. You don't realize how Americanized you really are until you take your narrow behind outside of America.
Right.
So so calling myself an African American is ridiculous on so many levels. From my family heritage, I know my family heritage. We've been in the United States. My 3 times great grandfather, my direct paternal line, was born on a plantation in Virginia in 1813. And guess what? His father was white. We know that family heritage. That goes all the way back to coming to the United States not the United States, coming to America in the early 1600s. And we know that line actually traced itself all the way back to Europe, because we went and did all the DNA test and did all that stuff. And so I always say, is like, how many people in America can say that their family has been here as long as my family has been here? And then we toss in the fact that I'm 1/16 Catawba Indian on my dad's mother's side, right? So I got white, I got Black, I got Catawba Indian, I got all that. I'm an American, dude. Let's just keep it simple. I don't want to sit there and say, well, I'm a white, European, African, Catawba, and I'm an American, period.
So
End
you
of
almost sound like
conversation.
Tiger Woods back when he
Coblation,
talked
right?
through it. He was like combination, right?
Yeah.
But I still want to get back to DeSantis because you were in the room with the devil. I want to know what that was like. But Shamika,
Yeah.
what thoughts on his intro there? And he left out. He railed on the African Americans, but he forgot that we're not African American anymore. We're now colored people of color.
True, true. People of color. And I actually, when he was saying that his laptop is black and everything, I looked at myself in the camera and I was like, oh my God, my earrings are too black. They're just so huge because I had them on with my afro. And then I was like, well, they're a little bit too big for my puff. But then I felt a little more comfortable because he's so black that I'm like, yeah, let me
Yeah.
be so black.
There you go. You in the right company, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Power to the people.
Yeah. So DeSantis, tell us about your DeSantis thing and your
Well,
thoughts on the banning of that study.
when I look at Florida has some of the largest, one of the largest populations of Black people in the country, and one of the largest populations of Black-owned businesses. And people are moving to Florida for a reason because Florida is flourishing, right? And they don't care about the color of your skin when it comes to you flourishing in Florida. And so, what's the purpose behind promoting the type? Well, they're not promoting American Black history. That's the way I look at it. I'm an American Black person. You cannot rightly talk about American history without including the contributions of Black people in America. But there's a massive difference between American Black history and this excrement that they're promoting called African American history, because it's all rooted and grounded in cultural Marxism. And the thing I appreciate about the Governor DeSantis is he recognizes that cultural Marxism is there solely to divide us. Right? Everything that they're doing, they're trying to pit white against black, male against female, young against old, rich against poor. Everything that they're doing in that realm of study is about breeding divide. Well, Florida is once again flourishing. Florida has more unity, and he's like, no, I'm not going to let you undo the work that we're doing and trying to indoctrinate the kids. And so when he said it, listen, he got like 5 or 6 standing ovations, and I stood up for every single one of them.
Wow. Well, Shamika, he makes a good point. That ban, that African American AP course, I got into somebody about the whole point of it being an AP course seemed odd to me. And I think the confusion was he was thinking I said you can't have an AP level course. You can have an AP level course in any study. You get into the details and you learn more and you focus on that particular topic. But I was thinking more along the lines of the need of it. African American, see, you get me into African American. Black history in the school, teaching it alongside and as part of American history because it's connected, definitely good. But having an AP course for African American history with what we know what was going on in schools in general, the failures, the indoctrination, the education loss from COVID, there's a lot more important things that should be higher on the priority list. But beyond that, even if you get past that and you prove that I'm wrong and AP African American Studies is a great curriculum and something that should be in school, it's how it's taught. And he talked about the Marxism, Shamika, all the media and everything that talked about the loud voices of racism against DeSantis. Those voices never, because they can't be honest, never really said what he openly said he took issue with, and they never said what was in it. It's not like he was saying, don't teach MLK, don't teach Nat Turner, right? Talk about what he was saying not to teach and what they were adding to it, including, the intersectionality and all the things they put that makes it no more Black history.
Right. And that was my issue with it. And that's why I think they named it African American Studies, because they really wanted to make people think it was just simply Black history and that people coming against it was coming against Black history. When I talked to one of the teachers in Florida who actually teaches Black history or African American history and had the opportunity on a high school level at that, and had the opportunity to hear exactly what the difference was and all of this queer theory and just the theories in general, I don't think that is appropriate for our kids. Now, of course, because it's an elective, if that's what you want your child to take, then that's your child. However, I think a lot of parents don't realize that that is actually included in the course, because you hear African American and you think, oh, my Black is beautiful, my Black is powerful, my Black is excellent. And you just like, yeah, let me sign my child up. But you don't even realize some of the things that are going to be taught that your child will be indoctrinated for. And I think that's what parents have to really pay attention to. You know, they're framing it as, oh, DeSantis is racist and he just doesn't want Black history taught. And so many people, even here, I saw someone come out and say, you know, our African American studies is safe, you know, and they were like bragging on it. And I went and I said, dear Durham, like African American studies is not the same as African American history. Don't be tricked. Look into it. Don't be fooled, because if you're not paying attention to what your children are learning, who knows where they may end up, because it's rough out here for sure.
Right.
Well, you know,
go ahead, Chris.
I'm inclined to think about instances where schools have lost accreditation. I don't know if you heard a few years back in the early 2000s, Clayton County, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta, the school district lost accreditation. And I have one of my best friends from high school. He and his wife used to live in Clayton County. And the long story short, my understanding of what happened is that the 96 Olympics happened, and there was a lot of Black folks who moved out of Atlanta and moved into Clayton County because the schools were good quality schools and the homes were cheap and so on and so forth, right? So you can get good, you know, a lot of house for your money. Well, as what ends up happening with your cousin and them, right? I mean, they're in the schools and they're like, hey, the schools are good. They're teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, so on and so forth. But the problem is we feel like they're not Black enough, right? So what ended up happening? Black folks decided to get on the school board, right? And why do they want to get on school board? Of course, they want to make sure that there's more Blackness being pushed. Well, wouldn't you know it? The daggone school district lost its accreditation, right? Do you know what damage it does to the economy of an entire county? The trickle down, as leftists like to call it, the trickle down damage that it does to an economy when the schools in the county are not accredited. Your kid can't go to college. All their work is for nothing, right? And there was some other school district, I think, in Georgia that lost its accreditation. And a lot of it had to do, and I can't say for certain, but I'm pretty sure that they might have been pushing some of the same crap way before critical race theory. That same mindset was pushed there, and it did, gosh, incalculable damage to the kids in those schools. And I just saw the other day, Illinois, right? Was it some school in Illinois? What, 23, some district, 23 schools where the kids couldn't basically read or write. Of course, we all know about Baltimore. This is like an ongoing thing.
Right.
And it's amazing to me that Black folks are so concerned about Black history, but can your kids read, write, and do arithmetic? Right?
No,
I mean, like, that's it.
That's what matters the most. You know, Shamika and Will and I, we did, was it Kill Meat? We did Kill Meat together. And we were talking about education and talking about some issues or whatever, and what should be taught. This was in the height of this CRT debate, and Brian asked me about what we should do, or what the concern is, and I said, if you really want to be honest, we're arguing about what books the kids should read and what books they can't read, and it shouldn't read. It doesn't matter because they can't read the books anyway.
Exactly.
Right?
That's true.
Exactly.
So no one's really focusing on that. So which books to put in there, but no one's focusing on how well they read, if they understand what they're reading. Can they do math? They talk about, I work in engineering and the hard sciences, right? And you have companies after George Floyd died saying, we're going to hire more Black engineers. And I'm like, where are you going to get them? Because I don't know an unemployed Black engineer. Everybody I know is employed. So outside of companies stealing them from each other to make their numbers look good, you're not going to find any. And what I talk about in the book is we have a guacamole problem, right? The government's mandating that everybody has a certain quota on guacamole, but nobody's monitoring how many avocados we grow.
Yeah.
So at some point, you're not going to be able to make the guacamole, right? So they want more engineers. We're going to put more money into recruiting. We're going to do this. We're going to start going to the HBCUs. We're going to do this. But there's only so many people majoring in the hard sciences. So you need more of them, and you need them to be competent and able. But if we're not feeding them with quality kids, because we're not teaching them math and science and how to read at the grade level from 3rd grade to 8th grade, we've already lost them. So you're never going to have enough. You can't start in junior year of high school and say, well, I'm going to start teaching the kids math and reading and think they're going to be an engineer. So that seems to be the problem. And you're right, Chris, the focus is in the wrong place. And it doesn't mean don't teach Black history. I have a problem with the way they teach it, but I don't have a problem with teaching it. It doesn't mean that, you can't talk about these topics and teachers should be, monitored to the point that they're not allowed to speak. But we got to be real. There's a education crisis, to be honest, and there has been for decades, and very few people are talking about it, right? How often do you watch a story on education and hear them talk about, unless it's just a damning story like in Baltimore where they brush over and they don't talk about solutions, but where they're talking about what we need to do to compete, where there's a gap academically, how do we close that? Or worse, Ian talked about this, like we're worried about white kids outperforming Black kids, but we're ignoring the fact that the white kids are performing at 53%, right? So even if you get the Black kids up to that level, you're still failing, right? And you have to compete against the other countries on a global scale. They're eating our lunch. How long can this happen before it just hurts society at large, right? And until we focus on that as a country, we don't fix it. And then as a group, if you're going to talk about Black people and their focus and their priorities and what they look at, I mean, we're all Black. It's Black History Month. So let's solve some of the issues and it's cut the bull. So let's say some things people don't say about the Black community and Blacks at large. The problem is you hear a lot of talk about what Black culture is and what it isn't, how we promote these things, what should be taught, what white people think of us, and all this other stuff, and what we think the system has done all these years, which all may have some merit at the time. But how much of those conversations are really spent on what Chris likes to call, I got to, so I want to make sure I get it right, Chris. It is the wretched subculture of African Americanism.
The wretched subculture of African Americanism. Yes, sir.
So that is key, right? That is one thing. There's like several things we're going to talk about here, and that's one. Very few people talk about that. And when you do, Shamika knows you get attacked. So what he means by that is there's a segment of population. It's not the majority. So no one sounding like a white conservative saying all Blacks are violent, run away from them. We're not Scout Adams here, but which we'll get to. But we are saying that there is a segment. There's a segment in every community. It's not exclusive to Blacks. The difference is you do not find white people or Asian people or Jewish people turning to look at the segment of their community that's not performing along societal norms and saying it's okay.
Right.
But then we will excuse it away. But by we, I mean the African Americans, right? Or we let some white liberals say, well, yeah, he knocked over a liquor store, but who are we to say, right?
Yeah.
We say
we don't know how tough his life was.
Right. So all that does is hurt him. It hurts him, it hurts the community, and it hurts it does no one a positive service, right? It fails everyone on every level. But we do that on a regular basis. Shamika, just recently, didn't we have, people can watch it, I don't want to say any names, that refused to answer a question about whether you should go into somebody's driveway and rob them. It's like, the question was simple. Go back and look. Last week, the question was, so should somebody go into somebody else's driveway and try to steal their car? And because I think the argument, he thought I was saying that it's okay to shoot him because Shamika wanted to shoot him. I mean, let's be real. And I wasn't saying Shamika was right that she should shoot him. I'm just saying what happened to people saying flat out, unequively, that is wrong and calling it out, right? I often joke, it's my thing. I like to say Seinfeld had that famous episode where the characters thought that George and Jerry were gay, and they were like, what, they think we're gay? And they say, we're not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I thought that was the beginning of the demise, because that's when we stopped shaming people. I like shame. So from that point on, no one ever said, they were like, I'm going to live my life right. but who am I to say what other people do? And if you keep doing it, you get to the point where a guy, a really smart, well-intentioned guy, can't say it's wrong to go into somebody's driveway. Or you see the videos where, you know, some guy tried to rob I think it was a Family Dollar, the last one I saw, and they had a security officer, and he shot him and killed him. And they were like, and his family's on TV crying. They're like, yeah, my brother went in to rob the store, and then he got shot. And I'm not condoning him robbing the store, but they ain't had to kill him.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
yeah, it's just property. Why shoot him at all? Or they could have shot him in the leg or something, or they should have tried to scare him. But
shoot you to take you out.
And I'm gonna give them the argument. Maybe they shouldn't have even shot their brother and killed him. But what I will say, it should be this face. But what I will say is, why is your first response what the guy did to the robber and not, well, he shouldn't have done this, right? So we've gotten away from that. So no one else does that. That's part of the problem. And then we have, I was telling Chris, when he says the wretched subculture of African Americanism, it made me laugh, because I like to say, go out and research and prove if I'm wrong. But I like to say I was the first one to use African American as a pejorative. So whenever I'm saying it on record now, I used to tease it on Twitter. So now you can watch this episode, you know what I mean. Whenever you hear me say African American, I don't mean it in a positive way. You remember the old Chris Rock skit, right? I either mean niggers, or I mean worse than them. I mean the Black elite who have degrees and success. Some of them even came from money. They're successful. They're doing well. They are the epitome of the American dream. And all they do is shit on the country. All they do is complain about their life. All they do is talk about anti-Black racism. And that I can just roll my eyes and ignore. But what chaps my hide is they then go to the hood and they talk to the poor Black people who are trying to get out and struggling. They're staying away from the games. They're doing the right thing, but it's hard. But I know there's hope, because I saw you, Mr. LeBron. I saw you, Oprah. And I know if I just work hard, I can live the American dream. And they look up and Oprah and them like, shit.
Right.
You ain't got no chances here.
Yeah. So
white man in the trailer park is better than me. Aren't you a billionaire? Shut up. But he's got his whiteness. That is what I mean when I say African American.
It's the elite, and I'm technically still a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, but
that's got to be rough.
Yeah, I haven't been active with the frat for a long time, because I get tired of being around elitist.
That's the talented tip, though. What's the problem?
Yeah. Well, see, here's the thing. I actually decided to cross because my father is also an Alpha, and we both pledged graduate chapter. The reason why I decided to cross was the Black men in Colorado Springs who were part of the graduate chapter. These were all educated, hardworking Black men, most of them military, retired, what have you, and they were doing good in the neighborhood, as they say, right? They were actually out there actively trying to add value to the neighborhood. And that was the first, because I looked at fraternities back in the day. I was like, no, I don't want no parts of it, because I was just like, first of all, if you touch me, I'm gonna kill you. I was like, if you and I was like, don't touch me. I don't play that. But when I got a chance, when my father decided to cross, and I got a chance to be around those gentlemen, and I said, okay, well, these are the type of gentlemen I'd like to be a part of. But when I look at a lot of the fraternities and sororities overall, like you said, this is what you hear all the time. You got Black folks who their whole thing is like, maybe they went to some prestigious university, right? A top 25 Ivy League or what have you. And they're the ones who are sitting there going, yeah, man, what I'm saying? I mean, yeah, I know I went to Harvard, Yale, Georgetown, so on and so forth. Yeah, but I'm still struggling, because I look at my white classmates who went to Georgetown or Harvard or Yale, and they're millionaires, and I'm only making 200,000-300,000. And I'm sitting there like, what was your major again? African American Studies? Bruh. You lucky to be making 65, 70 with a degree in. If you had,
you're lucky you're not calling names on the side of a Starbucks cup.
Exactly.
No offense to Starbucks workers.
No, but this is the thing. It's like, you're not comparing apples to apples, and this is what we do. We act like the color of our skin is the main thing that's stopping us. But I like numbers, Charles, right? And the median household income in America, right? Black folks are one of the lowest median household incomes in America. The math is real simple on it, bruh. Indians who I work in the technology sector. I've worked with Indians who are as dark as you or Shamika or as me. Matter of fact, Shamika, I've worked with Indian women who look like you but got straight hair, right? And it's just funny because do they probably encounter racism? I'm pretty sure, right? I'm pretty sure they encounter racism. Do they give a rat's butt? No. Here's the thing. 82% of Indian households are married couple households. The reason why Indians have by far the highest median household income is because they're married. A lot of them come here on H-1B visas. Well, the law says that you have to pay a minimum salary of 60, I think it's 61 or $62,000 a year. Well, let's do some math, shall we? You got a husband making 61 and a wife making 61. I'm just gonna do my math. Carry the one, so
Carry
on
the
so
one. Don't forget to
carry the one. That's $122,000. That's how you have the highest median household income. On the flip side, let's look at your cousin and them. The household income for Black folks is somewhere around $50,000. Well, some of that has to do with the fact that you ain't got no education. And then when you do got some education, where'd you get your degree in? Shamika, I'm sorry, I'm running my mouth. Charles, would you allow me to share my screen here? Something? Can I do that real quick?
Okay. Do I need to give you permission? Do you have permission?
Yeah, well, yeah, you disabled it. Yeah, so I
Did
want
I?
to show you.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have to enable it here.
Yep.
See, this is kind of I found this information a little while back. Georgetown University has their
Can you
Center
share it
for
now?
Yep.
There you go.
Georgetown University has their Center for Education and the Workforce. They produced this. I don't know how if this. I hope this is coming through clearly for you guys.
It's clear for me. I just want to make sure I move our pictures out of the way so people can see it.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
I cover the graduate.
yeah, cover the graduate, right?
Yeah.
There we go. Go ahead.
There you go. So
She's Black, by the way.
Yeah, she's Black. African
And
Americans
assistant,
tend
because
to
black men don't get degrees anymore. Go ahead.
exactly. African Americans tend to be overrepresented in lower earning majors.
Well, that's
right?
because the systemic racism pushes.
Yeah,
people.
yeah, because the white man will let you go to uh, uh, Harvard or Princeton or whatever like that, but he won't let you into the School of Engineering or the School of Business, right?
Mhm.
Well, no, if your scores are high enough, you go in, right?
Mhm.
But so here's the thing, right? Even among majors, this is kind of hard to hear, right? African Americans who majored in pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences administration have the highest median earnings of 84,000.
Oh, so major in STEM is what you're saying.
Surprisingly, right? So here it is. You have these, right? This is where the highest earning is. Pharmacy, industrial engineering, chemical engineering, so on and so
5
forth.
engineerings in a row. Six
Yeah,
engineers
exactly.
in a row.
Right.
Mhm.
But then here's the lowest earning.
See, didn't I
Now,
mention engineers? I told you all, go be an engineer. Mhm.
so most of the majors on the list, if people can't see it clearly, most
Well,
of the
here's the
majors
one
on the
I
list
like that no one ever talked about because something came up with this the other day. Is in the lower end, if they talk about sociology, childhood education. But look, theology and religion.
Mhm.
It's on the low end, but people still major in that, and they don't talk about that, right? A lot of the white evangelicals, they're not making money hand over fist.
Well,
Well,
unless you Jim Baker.
let's look at early childhood education. Right?
Osteen, I think he got a Ferrari. Oh, go ahead.
How long have we had Black folks? Now listen, and there's a whole lot of Black women at HBCUs
Mhm.
majoring in early childhood education.
True.
You know that the university charges you the same per credit hour to get a degree in early childhood education as they do to get a degree in business or anything like that.
Oh, that's not fair.
Yeah. So you decide to go early childhood education. So if you are a single mother who got your bachelor's degree in early childhood education, you're gonna make 38,000.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, and even if you go and get a master's degree, you might get up to 50, right?
Hmm.
That's not racism. That's called the free market.
Well,
So
they don't
you
like the
go
free
and get
market.
these degrees, social work, 41,000. Now
Mhm.
remember, Shamika, your sisters, your cousin and them, they're the most educated.
Yeah,
Yes.
they are.
But you got an education in a degree that pays 41,000.
Mm,
Mhm.
A master's degree is not going to jump you from 41 to 100,000.
right.
Right.
A PhD might get you up to 75. But how much debt do you have? So
Right.
anyway, I just wanted to share that so you can see that's Georgetown University Center of Education and the Workforce.
Right.
So just wanted to share that. The
Yeah,
facts
I want
matter.
that. I want this sheet.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. But yeah, the facts matter. And so when we're so busy going back to, the when you talked about Governor DeSantis and AP courses,
Mhm. It's
what
not
the
AP
hell?
math. We're
Yeah,
not debating AP
exactly.
math, AP chemistry. Mm-mm.
You, you,
Right.
you you want people because black folks they're gonna take the AP course in African American studies, be like, yeah, you know what? I want to know more about my people. Matter of fact, I'm gonna go to Bethune-Cookman, I'm gonna go to Florida A&M, I'm a major in African American studies. Great. Area and ethnic and civilization studies, earnings $39,000.
But
Mm.
wait, you make a good point though. Because I talk about this too. You talk about these 3 or 4 things that no one else talks about. Let's get into it. You just made another point. You were partially joking, but it's a serious thing. There is nothing wrong with wanting to know more about your people and your history, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this to Shamika and to others before. Here's an interesting thing, and I didn't think about it. It's like I'm a bright guy, but all these ideas don't just come to me because I'm brilliant. It's like you talk to people and you start, but you think and you're open to ideas, and you meet diverse groups of people and they talk. And I meet this Lithuanian woman. She's talking about something. She's talking about her childhood. Yeah. And then when I was going to Lithuanian school, you meet the Chinese people and you meet the Jewish people. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. Everybody is learning about from their family, but also in a classroom, education, blackboard knowledge about their history. But they're not doing it in school. They're doing it after school. They're going to Saturday school. They're doing whatever. So no one's saying you shouldn't know that, because now black is being unique. Black Americans are unique because all of their history is here. So some of that should be in the history you learn in school, without a doubt. But the in-depth stuff you want to know, like you want to know the first black engineer, the first black doctor, the first black pilot, the first black, all that kind of stuff. You want to learn all that, your family lineage and what happened in certain towns. You need to go someplace aside from the public school education. Get your math and science and your reading in the school and take extra time for that. Whoa, you want me to take extra school? Everybody else does it. In fact, other people will look at us like, why aren't you doing it? If they knew we didn't do it, they probably just assume we do it.
You take
Like when
extra
they don't.
time to learn how to bat. Listen, you ain't going to the NBA. You ain't going to
Okay.
NFL. You ain't going to NBA. But you sure enough will take extra time to learn how to double dribble, to bounce the ball,
Yeah.
Right.
and all that. But you
Right.
can't take time to go to the free public library.
Right. Right.
Right. Something else you said too, Christopher, made me think of how they're pushing so hard for AP African American Studies, but they have no problem with these schools that are claiming they're going to drop AP classes because Blacks can't qualify for them. So it's like you're not even trying to get in those classes. You're fine with them saying you're not smart enough, or, it's like, come on now, train my monkey. We
Right.
should be able to do these things.
Right.
But they're fighting for the wrong stuff. It
Oh,
bothers me.
she said shame up. Yeah.
Shamika bomb.
Just
No,
wrong.
yeah, and it's true. And then the other thing is so we have those, but the other problem is, so we won't call the things out that they don't do. We got the African Americans and their elite, what did you say, Shamika? You wanted to identify as the birds so you can fly around and poop on people. So these African Americans are just going around, coming in their fancy cars, dropping, you will never make it because of racism, and going away and leaving people who are struggling to believe that. But there is I don't know if I want to say generally a specifically cultural problem, but there is, we mimic what we see. So if the schools are now, in the last year or so focused on race, right? So they teach race. I mean, my kids' school, they're like, well, how's, my son is the only black kid in class. So they're little, right now, we'll see what happened over the years. They're a little amenable. They don't want to, they're like ruffle feathers. Like, all right, you don't want us to teach this. You're the only black man, whatever. But how should we teach? So that they're all on edge, wanting to push this diversity, this black, so they want to do it there. We hear it in the movies. We see it in the media. Every movie's, I mean, how many more British black men we got to bring over here to play slaves? I don't know. But
Hold on, Charles. You know the funny thing about that is I didn't notice
that none of them were there.
Well, yeah, it took like you sit there and they like, oh, and we're interviewing this guy, and the brother opens up his mouth. You're like, Wait a
Right.
minute. You know, you expect me to hear like a Southern accent or
No,
New York
no.
accent.
Mm-mm.
No.
Since you went there, I gotta say, I
You
gotta
talking
ask
about a spot of
you
tea?
two
He's
might
like, well,
know.
yes, I have my spot of tea. And I'm like,
Right.
You two might know better than me, but I always knew, and I love to do, but I always knew Idris Elba was British.
yeah.
But I never heard him talk to that accent, talk with his accent, except for when he did Luther. And now every time he talks, he's British.
Every time he
When
talks.
I
See,
used to see him
Daddy's
before, I
Girl,
knew he
I
was
didn't
British.
notice it.
I knew it, but when he was on The Wire and when he would do interviews, all these movies going up there, you never heard it. Once he did Sonic, he played one of the characters in the kids in the Sonic movie, right? And they interviewed him in the trailer, and he was so British, right? Now he's doing commercials. He's British, right? But everybody, Martin Luther King, Daniel Adelio, all of them, everybody, they all
Harriet Tubman.
right.
But here's a
They're
question.
gonna bring more British folks over here to be slaves. So we're gonna get our dose of slavery, right? But the other thing is, here's another interesting one. So we talk about, I do, to be fair, here, even blacks on the left talk about too many slave movies. But what I don't hear is they talk about how we are stereotyped in the country as criminals and all this stuff. But they keep making, are they on what were they on the fifth power? How many powers are they on now?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then there's what's the what, BM something?
BLM or something.
No,
like
it's
that.
B Black
BML.
Mafia family.
Yeah,
BMF.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, BMF.
So
Yeah, BMF.
so then there's the Shy. Every show that we have, it's our own, but they're all, I mean, to give them a credit, only Tyler Perry is making TV shows with the same kind of fighting and murder and cheating and espionage, but at least the families are rich, right? Yeah. Everybody else, they still selling drugs, doing drugs. Even the show, what is it? The Queen Sugar Show, right? Even in that show, even though she was married to an NBA player or whatever, the side thing is she's got the one brother who's trying to get right, got a kid, but he can't get out, stop selling drugs and all this other stuff. So you keep painting in the media, the movies and the schools and everywhere else that Black life is bad, oppression, this crime, whatever. Then a white man think you're a criminal and you're like, I can't believe you think I'm a criminal. You tell me you're a criminal. Even so, not just a white man who is racist and biased and painting you because they got all the boardroom and the executive spots and all this. But then when we get blacks in the directing chair, they're still directing crime, black drugs. It must be what black people do. So how can you blame a white guy?
But Shamika, I got a question for you. I mean, you're up there. I know you're aware of the manosphere, the Black manosphere, and I think the lady Just Pearly Things, her content's very fascinating because she's a redheaded white woman in London, right? And her audience is like 98% Black, right? And these Black folks are all like the descendants. They're all either African or Caribbean, and they have some of the same issues. Many of the same issues that these women are complaining about are the same issues that we talk about here in the United States of America. The difference is they don't have the slave narrative to blame things on, right?
Right.
So I'm just kind of curious if you've watched a lot of that content and what you think when you hear them and kind of compare it against the sisters here in America and the thought process.
So I just learned who she was probably within like the last week. Actually, it's right here. I have it in my notes, I think, or Just Pearly Things. You know, I just wrote that down yesterday from a meeting because of how her YouTube exploded and people just love her. And she's moving to America, actually. She's American.
Yeah, she's American.
Yeah, and she's coming back soon. But I had no idea who she was. And so I feel like every time I talk, somebody will show up and say, well, it's not just Black women, or it's not just, it's not just Black women. American women sometimes have the same exact issues. And I don't really pay attention to a lot of the people that maybe not American, or like I don't go and look to see who is this that said that this comment. Are they Black? Are they African? Or are they, but what I do notice is how her channel exploded. It doesn't seem like she gets the hate that I feel like I get and that I've constantly been battling against for years. Black women are the reason why I got kicked off Facebook. So it's like, I'm telling you things, sister to sister, I guess it would be, so to speak, but you hate me, yet this woman here doesn't seem to get the same pushback. That's confusing to me.
Oh, she's gonna get it when she gets here.
Oh, well, no, she's gotten a lot of pushback. In fact, her platform's been demonetized on a regular basis, and she does get a lot of hate because they're like, who is this white woman to be saying the things that she's saying? But I think it's her approach to things, and people say, one of the things people always say, oh, it's your tone, right? The way you say things, and I get so like I said, I was telling Charles before you came on that I'm about truth, right? Truth is facts in their proper context, right? And truth is for grown folks. Most folks can't handle the truth, but knowing the truth will set you free.
Right.
See, you are a free woman, Shamika, because you are a truth seeker. You're a truth teller, and truth is very uncomfortable in many cases. And these are the kind of things that people don't want to address. When we sit there and we can look at the numbers and say, hey, yeah, Black people might end up in jail disproportionately, but unfortunately is because we commit a disproportionate number of crimes. Charles and I, as Black males who are on the more mature side, Charles an old man, I'm still young,
Yes, he is. Yes, he is old.
No, but no, but like, it's interesting is how I looked at the CDC stats on the death rate for Black men. And I'm going to go off the top of my head. So like from like 0 to 19, homicide is the leading cause of death. I think it's like 27% of Black male deaths from ages 0 to 19 are because of homicide. And then I think it's unintentional injuries is the second leading cause. And then oddly enough, which is I don't know if I can say the self-termination. I think we got to be careful. I guess we're not allowed to use that word, but self-termination, I think it's something like 11%. So from 0 to 19, if a Black male dies by age 19, it's something like 68% of the reason why is either homicide, unintentional injuries, or self-termination. From 19 to 44, homicide is still the leading cause. It's something like 25% or something like that, right? And it all told, it's like homicide, unintentional injuries, and self-termination, I think, still count for something like 61% of all Black male deaths. Here's the crazy thing. After age 44, so when you hit your 45th birthday, homicide drops from like 27% or whatever like that down to 2.9%. What's up with that, Charles? So I'm saying, and I've told some young dudes that I do some coaching and mentoring with. I'm like, hey man, you're not clear yet. You got to get 45, right?
Right.
But why is that?
Right.
I mean, like, it's just the realities. It's the numbers. You're more likely to die because you have these young men who are out of control. Now, why are they out of control? As you hit on, Shamika, how most of those young men, where the daddy at?
Right.
Do you know your daddy?
Right. Is mama keeping you from daddy? Listen, there was a young man that was just murdered here. It may be 2 weeks now, but he was skipping school, was supposed to be at school, wasn't, got killed like in the path behind the school or something. They were doing, something they had no business doing. He was shot. And all I heard was, oh, goodness, we've got to do something about this gun violence, gun violence, gun violence. And it just it didn't strike me as odd. But of course, I was listening. No one mentioned he was skipping school.
Yeah.
There was his mom there. I never saw a father. I saw a female mentor who was saying, that was her mentee. And I was thinking, okay, that's another problem. That he didn't seem to have any male mentors, but it's almost like we don't even like focusing on the problem. We don't want to say the obvious, like, okay, why was he ducking school? My child was so great. Right. Like, okay, I'm sure you do have a good child, but obviously your child broke the rules and wasn't following the rules and didn't care what mama was going to say. I ducked school one time in my life. I was so stressed about what would happen if my mama found out. I couldn't duck again. People were like, where's the fear of parents and getting in trouble and wanting to do right? It's gone. But when we have issues like that, we'll point the finger at everybody else except that little hard thing that nobody wants to address and talk about.
See, you all guide me to the conversation. I can just sit back and listen to you two. You mentioned the female mentor, and you said that's kind of like as a side note, and that's a problem. So we know Chris mentioned that there's an issue with too many young men without a father or a man as a role model. But I hear you both. You are like kindred spirits. I can hear a little bit of each
I told
of
you
you.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan of
right.
shit. I bow down. I'm a fan.
But you each, in different times in conversations with me, have talked about the emasculation of Black men, and I know Rihanna kind of took some heat from the cover, and I wanted to get your thoughts on not just her, but how that plays into this, pot of problems we're talking about in the homicide rate for young Black men, or the number of kids who don't go into STEM, or skipping school, or whatever, to get drug use, whatever the problems are. How much of that is a part, especially in the Black community, with what's going on with that? Well, either one of you can go first.
Go ahead, Shamika.
Oh, well, oh God. First of all, that cover made me so angry. And I saw Marcellus Wiley.
Yeah, Marcellus Wiley. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He put out a video and said that, men, it was their egos were bruised pretty much, and that a real man has no problem taking care of his child and helping the child.
What?
And, that and submitting to their woman so that the woman and the woman lead.
Okay.
And it was so frustrating to me.
Marcellus Wiley said that?
Yes. And I was shocked.
He has such good moments sometimes, and then he falls, but they all have to come back. They can't leave completely or they're done. Now, the first two things you said, there's nothing wrong with, right? But
right.
Yeah, of course, but the picture was telling a story, and it was intentional in the way it was shot.
It was intentional.
But if you want to give them a little bit, you can say, well, Rihanna is a star, and that's why they had her in front. But
then just have her on the cover by herself.
Right, but to say
no
raising
man.
your kid, but for him to say raising your kid, like that's what people had a problem with, right? You know what people had a problem with.
Exactly. And it's frustrating because when you hear men come in and say, oh, we have no problem with the woman leading, you should have a problem because you see what it has done in the community. For decades, you just let the woman, you thrown up your hands and said, hey, you got it. And no, she don't got it. You can see by what's happening to the children that we don't have it. Women are a lot more empathetic. We are a lot more kumbaya a lot of times. We don't have that discipline sometimes that we need, where men can actually have that structure that these kids need. And so it's frustrating when I even hear Black men that take up for that type of stuff, because we need you to put your foot down. You already got women running around here saying they're more educated. They don't need a man. I can do this by myself. I got it. You got the brat and her wife or whatever. Everybody's celebrating that. And it's like, they couldn't do this without a man. So stop lying, talking about you don't need a man. I commented on the Shade Room, so they needed a man. And somebody at your big age, you don't know, Black women just go crazy. At your big age, you don't know that they just need a DNA, but you need it from a man.
Still had to get it.
Stop being silly. And so they don't realize.
Somebody use a turkey baster or not, right?
Right. Like, where did it come from? They did not rub clits and have this baby. Let's just be honest. And so when they push this stuff, it bothers me because we accept the lie and we don't see that it's being pushed on purpose. There was a graphic artist that actually said in order to make him look smaller like that, it wasn't just because she was in front. They literally had to actually make him look smaller. And so why don't we ask these questions? Why are they doing this? Why are they pushing that? Why did they have the guy on the cover of Ebony and people were trying to say it was anime with his lips pursed like that?
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at the character they claimed it was, it don't look the same. And it's like, we just let a lot of things go and won't speak up. And that bothers me so bad because can y'all see? Can y'all see the issues in the community from women being in charge and women doing this thing on their own? And I don't know. I'll circle back because it gets me so upset.
Shamika, what magazine was that Rihanna was on?
Vogue.
Vogue.
Okay, so that was Vogue. So help me out then, because no one asked this question. I got a better question than all you. You had great questions, and I got a better question. What was the magazine that Marcellus Wiley was on the cover with his wife leading him like on a collar? Oh, he didn't do that. So he's gonna come out making a video that it's okay, but he would never get on some magazine cover with his wife pulling him with his head down, pulling on some chain.
With his posture.
So,
right. This is just stuff people say so they can get in with the bird droppers. You know, those darn African Americans, Chris.
So I'm a military brat, right? Born and raised military brat, and my father's always said, "Son, when in command, command." That's a quote from Admiral Bull Halsey, right? Who basically won the war in the Pacific in World War II. He said, "When in command, command." And when I was on the dating scene before I met my wife, I pretty much let every woman I met know that I was raised to be a man and raised to be the man. And if you ever want to have any debate about that, I'm not the one for you. Just go. We're not going to have any debate about that. I accept full responsibility for everything that takes place as a man and as the man. And you know what happens? My wife and I have a very peaceful home, peaceful relationship because I stay in my lane. She stays in her lane, and it's a harmonious relationship. My wife is complementary of me, the way God created woman to be. See, it's funny how when you start having conversations with a lot of these African American women, listen, I question the Christianity of those who refer themselves as African Americans because they're making their skin, their melanin, which is literally one of the most superficial aspects of your humanity. They're making that an idol. So when you got the black girl magic and so on and so forth, and I'm just like, please show me how your melanin thinks. I ain't never seen nothing showing that melanin thinks, that melanin is capable of conscious thought, that is capable of problem solving. No, everything is culture. Culture is an agreed upon set of norms, mores, values, and traditions held by a group of people. Now, I was raised as an American Black person, right? I'm an American. Obviously, I'm Black. I used to tell people, like, because I started out doing radio. So, right, when I'd be on the radio and, people would hear me speaking and they'd be like, "Oh man, who is this guy?" And of course, there's some people thinking I was a white guy, right? And I'm like, well, and I would say, listen, I'm Black, got this permanent tan, I got a big old nose, big black lips. I'm as Black all day, every day, 24/7, 365, right?
You sound Black to me.
I know, isn't that funny? It's like most people just, but they apparently they couldn't quite tell on the radio, right? Well, see, I'm a little bit more loose right now with you guys than I am in those.
Oh, okay. Give me your radio voice. Let me see.
See, I can't do it now, right? Me too. So I can't do it now. Now I'm just chilling. I'm just talking.
Sound like Black Chris.
Sound like Black Chris. Yeah. But that was an interesting thing. It's like this whole idea of Blackness. I was always raised to be proud of being Black, to not be, and being proud really is more of not being ashamed of being Black. There's nothing shameful about being Black, but it was a whole
conversation about being proud.
Exactly. So it's like, not to, I mean, my father was a federal agent in the Air Force. He was one of the first black federal agents in the Air Force. His whole career, we were the only, my family was the only speck of pepper in a sea of salt, right? And so, but I never had a day where I felt inferior because we had a strong traditional nuclear family. To
Right.
your point, Shamika, about rules, my father was and still is, my parents been married for 54 years. Okay. My father is the head of the household. He established the path that we're going to go on. And
Right.
so there's this painting by the guy, I think his name is Wack, W-A-K. And you might have seen this painting. It's like the black man climbing up this mountain. He's got his wife and a child on his back. It's one of my favorite paintings. But I grew up with my father led the way.
Right.
So all this crap about, and it doesn't mean that my mom was less than.
Right. Right.
This is the problem when we're dealing with this wretched subculture of African Americanism, which I say is cultural Marxism for Negroes, right?
Mhm.
Cultural Marxism is the curse, it's the poison that's affecting this whole world. And you can look at the out of wedlock birth rates that are exploding all over the world. Interestingly enough, the two places that have not seen an explosion of out of wedlock birth rate, Korea and Japan. Well, cultural Marxism has affected them differently because they just ain't having babies,
Right.
right? So the women are out of order in that regard,
Mm-hmm.
right? And of course, the men are out of order also. I mean, don't get me wrong, but cultural Marxism, it exalts the woman far. It puts her up on a pedestal, and pedestals are inherently unstable things. It's easy to
Mm-hmm.
fall from them, so it puts them up on a pedestal that
Ooh,
on the
I like that.
and yeah, finger snap, right? And it puts them
Yes.
up on a pedestal, but you can't
Mm-hmm.
stay up there,
Right.
right? All it takes is just a step
Especially since you got up there
forward.
artificially.
You got up there,
You're out of order by being there. So, it's not the natural order, right?
Mm-hmm. That
and
was
so when
good.
you look at, it was black men, I love from 1865 to 1915, right? Here's the numbers. There were 4.4 million black folks in America in 1865. The 1860 census shows there 4.4 million black folks. One of the things I bet they won't teach you in the AP classes in Florida is that of the 4.4 million black folks who were in America in 1860, 10% of them, roughly
Yeah.
400,000, were free blacks.
Free. Mm-hmm.
How many folks knew that we had free black folks in America in the South,
Right.
in the North, who were voting, right? But they act like black folks never voted or never held off. No, black folks were voting. Black folks were going to college. Black folks held office prior to 1860. But okay, look, 1865, end of the Civil War, right? We had roughly 4.4 million black folks. By 1910, I'm sorry, from 1860 to 1910, right? 50-year period, basically two generations, went from 4.4 million to 10 million. Here's what's fascinating. Remember, for the most part, we were not allowed to learn how to read. Frederick Douglass had the scars on his back from being beaten for trying to learn how to read. Thomas Sowell said it best. He said, it's remarkable that we went from essentially like single digit literacy rate to over 50% literacy rate in a 50-year period. Not only that, we went from basically owning not much at all, but by 1910, Booker T. Washington and the National Negro Business League, they have the stats. I have the book here in my office. I had to grab it. They have the stats. Black folks, there were collectively 10 million black folks. We collectively owned 20 million acres of land. Now, that number is just an abstract number. Let me give you some context. That's the equivalent of black folks owning the entire state of South Carolina plus the state of Rhode Island with a little bit left over. How did we go from slaves to owning all that land and owning businesses in that 50-year period? I will
And then
tell
back
you
to
this.
Jim Crow 2.0.
In Jim Crow. And I'll tell you, it didn't happen with black women leading.
Right.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow.
We
Well,
had
Exactly.
we could obviously keep going and we can do
I
this
know.
again
I'm
because
just
we're running
like,
to the end. I know.
remember we late? We could go a little longer.
But I want to one thing, because what I like about this is every time one of you speaks, it leads me to something else I think is important. Now, when you mentioned that, I know the point was to talk about being out of order and the natural order of things, but you talked about blackness and what these people accomplished at the end of that in this 50-year period. But earlier in when you were speaking, you talked about specifically about, blackness and what your blackness is, being the one speck of pepper in the sea of salt. And, pride. We talked a little bit about pride. You talked about not, by that, you didn't mean being proud like black is beautiful, black girl magic. You meant that you shouldn't feel ashamed of, right? You're an equal. And so it makes me wonder now, we get this far, and I joked about the Jim Crow 2.0, but it's important because we get this far. You just ended on a dramatic trajectory of upward mobility from where we came from in that 50-year period. But at that point, when you stopped, it's still 1910. We still had more to go.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're 100 years removed from that. We got people we got educated women with master's degrees and PhDs. We own businesses. We run the media. Our culture and our music is sprawn out across the world. Every country knows, black artists. So it's a twofold. Why are people buying into the Jim Crow 2.0? And why do mostly the black left, though, but why do people speak in the terms of, if everything's so racist, why do they speak in the terms of the slave master? Why do they speak in the term? I still hear people today talking about the one drop. Didn't Ben Jealous was on? Ben Jealous said that, because I was joking with him that he did his DNA. Skip Gates did his DNA and came to him and said, "You're the whitest black man I've ever met."
Man,
and
don't even get me started.
And what he said was, "Hey, I am one." What was he? He was like Pocahontas. What's her name? Elizabeth Warren. Ben was like, "I am 1/32nd," but whatever, right? And the law said if I get one drop, which I get to his point, but I'm like, why in 2023 are we still buying into these things, using their terminology, using their measuring stick, saying everything's systemically racist and everything's bad, but then we fall back on everything they did. We want to bring it up. We want to say, basically, the black left, here's the best thing. Take this quote away. We got a lot of quotes in this one. The black left, they're white supremacists. Because what they're saying is that white must be superior, right? Because blacks can only do, blacks cannot do, blacks are not, they don't allow us to do. That's the way they speak today, not then. So you just talked about where we went from 1860 to 1910. Why is it now 113 years later and we're talking like we still in 1860?
Yes.
Charles, my pride. So I met my paternal great grandfather, that's a whole nother conversation. I always ask a lot of black folks, tell me your paternal great grandfather's name. How few black folks can tell you their paternal great grandfather's name? I met my paternal great grandfather back in when I was 15 years old.
Well, that's not fair for me because I'm kind of like you. My family's old. My father was born in 1920.
Yeah. Well,
so my grandfather was born in the 1800s.
Well, so my Charles. Well, so my paternal my paternal great grandfather was born in Greenville, Mississippi in 1909, and I remember the only thing.
Your great grandfather was born in 1909. Yeah. My grandfather was born in 1898.
Yeah, well,
you're only 2 years younger than me.
So
why you two acting like I'm old? But go on. I'm sorry.
So the funny thing behind
my grandfather, I do know my great grandfather's name is Robert Love.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing with that, man, it's funny you mention that because, I know once again those generations. Mm-hmm. I remember the conversation with my great grandfather was that he said his birthday is the same day as Ronald Reagan's, but he's 2 years older. That's the biggest thing that stands out from that whole conversation I had with him. But I just, I look at pictures of him and I think about what my father talked about with his grandfather, right? Mm-hmm. And how he was a brilliant man who spoke French fluently, right? How's he from Greenville, Mississippi, who migrated to Detroit in the Great Migration? He spoke French fluently, right? I'm like, how did he do that, right? And I sit there and I think, I can't imagine if my great grandfather were alive today, going to him and saying, great grandfather, I know things might have been tough for you in the Jim Crow South in the early 1900s, but great grandpa, you don't understand.
Right.
It's hard on a brother. And I'm sitting there going like, listen,
right.
I'm college educated. I make a pretty nice income. I've been to the White House a couple times, worked on Capitol Hill, worked in the White House, worked in corporate America, have traveled internationally. I've spoken on basically every major news outlet. And I'm sitting there going like, how am I oppressed?
Correct.
You did all that before you were black, though.
Yeah, exactly. And I just get annoyed. And like I said, I start stuttering because I'm just like, your math ain't mathing, bruh. How is it? Like, I mean, here I live in the Metro DC area, Shamika, right? And across the river, in PG County, which they used to brag about the fact that it was the wealthiest, predominantly black county in the country. Which ask them, they'll tell you. They're quick. Well, see, now it's not, because a whole lot of them they got tired of the crime. See, because as the crime started moving from DC down into PG County, the elites started moving down to Charles County, which is just the next county over. Lo and behold, there's crime increasing in Charles County too. Surprise, surprise, right? But they're quick to tell you that it's the wealthiest, predominantly black county. But they be the first ones to talk to you about racism. And like, so there's, I guess, some white lady is the one who coined the phrase that racism is prejudice plus institutional power. And I heard that. I mean, I've been in the Washington D.C. area for 20 years now, and I'm going to tell you, man, there's black folks all over the place running things, so on and so forth. And it blows my mind that these folks, who, you got a husband and wife who are both senior government employees, probably got $250,000 to $300,000 combined household income. They live in a 4,000, 5,000 square foot home, got matching his and hers BMWs with vanity plates. The kids got 20 million pair of Air Jordans, big screen TVs, and so on and so forth. And they will swear on a stack of Bibles that they're oppressed. I'm like, you a GS-14, GS-15, you run a multi-million-dollar division. You have power and say so over this. How, Sway?
Right.
You're saying, how are you oppressed? I'm trying, you got white folks out there going, yo, can I get some of that oppression?
Yeah,
Right.
but it's even worse than that, though, Chris, because those are the elites. They got money. They're successful. You can get, because that's a little easier for if a normal person knew that, they'd be like, that guy crazy. He's making all this money. But even in education, I watch people. They're on the school board. They're principals. They run. They're teachers. They have all of the control on the local level of how education is disseminated to children. They run it, right? It's all women. Let's be real. They're like 90% women, right? Many of them are black. And yet what they're saying is, we got to teach this stuff, this what people call CRT or whatever you want to call it. We got to teach this stuff that we all lament against. We have to do this because there's oppression in the system. What system? The government, whatever, all the systems. So like the education system, yes, but you run it. And you've been running it for 50 years.
For years.
You've been running it since it was implemented in the 70s. What do you mean? So there, it's even more problematic because they disseminate the information. So they write the emails that go home to the parents. They send the leaflets. They talk about what they're going to do. They pick the trips, the school trips and all that. And if they're doing all that under the guise of believing that we're living in Jim Crow 2.0, how can they not focus on race and gender and all these other things? It's an existential threat, right? The black man is going to become extinct if they don't do this, right?
But
and they believe that. I know, but they believe that. And they won't, but they believe that.
But I don't understand, like, how is it that you live in a city that's controlled by black folks? Every level of government in the District of Columbia is controlled by black folks. And in many cases, like up to the mayor, it's controlled by a black woman, right?
Do they have even more than Chicago? Because Chicago's up there. Illinois,
it's probably
the school board, the chief of police.
Oh yeah,
they have the alderman, the mayor, the lieutenant governor, the Cook County board president. They got Chicago a lot.
Yeah, no, I think black folks. I had to look that up, but I'm
pretty close, right?
I think Chicago. I think Detroit. DC has everybody beat in terms of, like, it's literally.
Well, except not my hometown. Not my hometown.
Well, Gary, man, don't get me started on Gary, man. Look,
not GI.
Look, I drove through Gary and rolled up my windows.
You were scared, weren't you?
I was, oh Lord, we's in Gary.
You want to see black, Shamika? You ever been to Gary? You ever been to Gary, Shamika?
No.
You want to see black? Gary is the blackest city in the country and has been since 16. Look, remember, we're gonna go to music real quick, but remember George Clinton, P-Funk, All Stars Parliament, when they talked about Chocolate City, he was like, we got Newark, we got Gary.
Oh, yeah.
Gary, Indiana. On the map. That's where the brothers live. Everybody black. Even the white folks black in Gary.
Oh, wow.
They so black, the white folks are black. He might look white, but when he talks to you, like, that dude looked like he was white. He Gary white. That's black.
Yeah, it's frustrating for me when I hear people continuously talking about racism and being oppressed. Like, I look at pictures of my family mother and father, my great grandmother, sitting in her home, a child on her husband's knee. I remember going to that same house when I was a little girl. It was a nice house. And of course, you talked about this in the beginning of the show. They were married and they were together and they stayed together. And a lot of people would call them rich and uppity because they actually had a nice place. My great grandmother was a homemaker, but my great grandfather, he went out and he worked and they did okay. So it's frustrating when I hear people now here in 2023. You have $1,000 phones. You can go out and buy $200 and $300 sneakers, $600 for a wig, and a designer bag, but you actually feel like you're more oppressed than those who were either had to go through slavery, coming out of slavery, had to build these communities. How are you more oppressed than that? And it's always frustrating for me because I'm like, there's no way my daughter should feel like she suffered the same oppression as my grandmother or my great grandmother. Like, there's no way I would teach my children, oh, things are just, they're worse. Yeah, your great grandma Hannah was born into slavery, but like you said, Christopher, it's a lot worse now. Like, we sound silly, and I often wonder, do these people, you said your paternal grandfather, do y'all have any pictures at all of what life used to be like? My grandmother,
yeah, but they get it from school.
Tons of pictures. But do y'all have family pictures where you can look at life and you see couples and the children look happy, the children are clean, your grandma don't have her butt to the camera bending over like, things were so different then. And it's like, am I the only one with family pictures? Like, what's going on here that y'all have forgotten and you let these people push this stupidity on you? It's ridiculous.
Shamika, I'll tell you, I had a conversation with my parents and my favorite aunt, so my dad's younger sister. And I said, look, I got a bone to pick with y'all, right? I said, because it just came to me one day. My whole life, my parents always talked about growing up in Detroit. Like, my parents are, baby boomers growing up in Detroit. They, grew up, literally around the way from Smokey Robinson, Aretha Franklin, all that, right? I mean, that's because that's, Detroit. We Motown, right? I mean, so that was what my parents grew up with. And I just remember my parents always talked about how everybody had a mother and a father in the home, right? I mean, and it was like, and it would, it was an insult back then to basically like kind of make a mama joke, because if you grew up without a father, that was a source of shame. Everybody had a daddy in the home.
Yes.
And so I sit there and I think about how, and I told my parents, I said, when we got to my generation with Gen X, and especially with millennials, I said, why have you guys allowed the narrative to go forward that the current either failure to launch, failure to form traditional nuclear family, or the broken family? Why have you allowed that narrative to go forward that that's the legacy of slavery, when you grew up and everybody you grew up with had a mother and father? I'm sitting there going, y'all should have been the ones saying, excuse me, we had moms and dads, but but you ever notice that? Have you heard baby boomers sit there and say, hell no, we had moms and dads?
Or they put the excuse, oh, it's the economic hardship. That's what they say now. And it's like, you got $1,000 phone.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
And COVID's a fluke, so you can't throw the COVID. I mean, some people suffered under that, but that was a fluke. They've been saying this before that. So
Yeah.
when the money was flowing and everything was good and the economy was great, they were still saying they were oppressed. We have to leave it there because we are way over, because Chris can talk and Shamika's. But look, you say you're a fan of Shamika's. Kudos to you. Would be Shamika's was engaged. And look at her. She's like looking like, give me more. So you must have done a good job, Chris. We have to have you back if she will allow it, and we can talk about that more. And what I do want to say, since it's the last few days of February to ask that both of you and anyone watching go out and make the most of the remainder of Black History Month by pushing back against the madness that you're hearing about it. And don't, like Chris said, be like he wanted his parents to be, and don't take on that negative defeatist belief of Black history and overcome, as Shanika's singing. He is Christopher Harris, the executive director of Unhyphenated America. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Hey, great to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
Patriot J, I'm saving the day. Patriot J, I'm saving the day from you commies who lame. No, you can't fuck with me. I got a country to save. God bless the U.S. of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save because I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.